Have you ever felt like you are walking on eggshells around someone? They twist your words, make you doubt yourself, and somehow turn every situation into a way to boost their own ego. If this sounds familiar, you might be dealing with a narcissist. The problem is, confronting them directly almost never works. They thrive on manipulation, and if you play by their rules, they always come out on top. But what if you could turn the tables and make them face the consequences of their behavior? What if there was a way to punish a narcissist, not with anger, but with a strategy that strips them of the power they crave? In this video, we'll uncover 13 ways to deal with narcissists that will make them feel the discomfort they deserve, without falling into their traps. Before you can begin to punish a narcissist, you first need to recognize them. Narcissists wear many faces, and they can blend in with the crowd, making it difficult to spot them at first. They have an inflated sense of their own importance, a constant need for admiration, and an uncanny ability to make everything about themselves. But beyond the obvious traits, narcissists often lack true empathy. They may act like they care about you, but their concern is always self-serving, designed to manipulate or control. A narcissist will often tell you how great they are and demand constant validation from others. Their relationships tend to be shallow because they see people as tools to be used, not as equals. Over time, this leads them to leave behind a trail of broken relationships. When things don't go their way, they will quickly resort to gaslighting, making you question your own perceptions and memories. For example, a narcissist might twist a past conversation, saying you agreed to something you never did, and use that distortion to manipulate you into doing what they want. Recognizing these traits is crucial, because the sooner you identify the narcissist in your life, the sooner you can begin to take control of the situation. Narcissists thrive when they can keep you off balance, making you question your own feelings and reality. If you allow them to manipulate you, you lose your sense of self. By identifying the signs of narcissism early, you can protect your peace and start to build the mental clarity you need to deal with them effectively. The power of disengagement is one of the most effective tools you have when dealing with a narcissist. Narcissists thrive on attention, whether positive or negative. They need constant validation to feel important, and if you engage with them emotionally, you're giving them just that. When you disengage, you strip away their power. Narcissists feed off your reactions, so when you stop giving them the satisfaction of seeing you upset or manipulated, they lose their grip on the situation. This doesn't mean you should shut down emotionally or become cold, but rather refuse to react in the ways they expect. For example, when a narcissist tries to provoke you into an argument, don't take the bait. Instead of defending yourself or getting defensive, remain calm and unreactive. It might feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you're used to reacting to their provocations, but over time you'll start to see their manipulation attempts fall flat. Narcissists often try to create drama to maintain control, but when they realize they're not getting the emotional responses they crave, they'll likely shift tactics. Disengagement doesn't mean completely cutting them out of your life, but rather taking away the emotional fuel that drives their behavior. It's about learning to observe without getting caught in their emotional web. The key is to stop feeding their need for drama, validation, or conflict. By doing so, you take away the very thing they need to function, your energy and attention. This is the first step in punishing a narcissist, because it makes them uncomfortable in ways they're not used to. Narcissists expect to control the narrative, but when you refuse to engage on their terms, you start to regain control over your interactions with them. Setting and enforcing boundaries is one of the most powerful ways to punish a narcissist, but it requires consistency and strength. Narcissists don't respect boundaries because they see others as extensions of themselves, not individuals with their own needs or limits. Therefore, setting boundaries with a narcissist can feel like a battle, but it's a necessary one. You need to make it clear that certain behaviors are not acceptable and that you won't tolerate manipulation, disrespect, or emotional abuse. The key is to establish these boundaries calmly and firmly without leaving room for negotiation. For example, if a narcissist tries to belittle you or talk over you, you need to assertively say, "I won't tolerate being spoken to like that," and walk away or end the conversation if they continue. When you enforce boundaries, you don't need to explain yourself endlessly or defend your decisions. You simply state your limit and stand by it. Narcissists will test these boundaries repeatedly, so it's important to remain consistent. If you allow one small violation to slide, they'll push further, and you'll lose your power. Narcissists often try to guilt trip or manipulate you into lowering your guard, but holding firm shows them that their tactics don't work on you. You're not just protecting yourself from their toxic behavior, you're teaching them that their manipulations no longer have any effect. When they can't push your boundaries, they're forced to confront the fact that their control over you is slipping. This frustrates them, which is exactly what you want. Narcissists feed on control, so when you take it away by enforcing boundaries, you're striking at the heart of their power. You regain your peace and your strength by refusing to let them dictate the terms of your relationship. Narcissists will often provoke you in order to get a reaction, whether it's anger, frustration, or sadness. They crave that emotional response because it validates their control over you. They want to see you react, so they can either manipulate the situation or feel superior. Staying calm and composed in the face of provocation is one of the most powerful tools you have in dealing with them. When they try to push your buttons, resist the urge to engage emotionally. Instead, take a deep breath and respond with neutrality. For example, if they belittle you or try to make you feel guilty, instead of defending yourself or getting upset, simply acknowledge the statement without emotion. You could respond with something like, "That's your opinion," and then move on. This may feel uncomfortable at first, but the narcissist will quickly realize that their usual tactics of emotional manipulation no longer work. The more you remain calm and unreactive, the more power you take away from them. Narcissists thrive on drama and chaos, so when they can't provoke you, they're forced to either retreat or escalate in ways that become increasingly transparent. When you don't react, you deny them the satisfaction they crave, and you keep control of the situation. Narcissists will try to bait you, but staying grounded and composed deprives them of the emotional fuel they need to continue their behavior. The more you master this technique, the more you show them that their attempts to manipulate or hurt you will not affect you. This frustrates them, leaving them with fewer tools to manipulate or control the situation. Ultimately, by staying calm, you regain your power, and the narcissist finds themselves with less influence over your emotions and reactions. Narcissists rarely take responsibility for their actions, often deflecting blame or twisting situations to make others feel at fault. One of the most effective ways to punish them is by holding them accountable for their behavior, without engaging in a confrontation. Narcissists will try to avoid responsibility at all costs, and if you give in to their gaslighting or excuses, they'll continue their toxic behavior. However, when you calmly and consistently remind them of their actions, without anger or frustration, you force them to face their own behavior. It's not about attacking them or demanding an apology. It's about making them recognize that you are not fooled by their manipulations. For example, if a narcissist makes an unreasonable request or fails to follow through on an agreement, calmly remind them of what was said or agreed upon. And you might say, "You agreed to do this, but it hasn't been done." Or, "You promised this would happen, but it didn't." Keep your tone neutral and firm. By sticking to the facts and not getting drawn into an emotional argument, you're holding them accountable without giving them the emotional reaction they desire. Narcissists hate being confronted with the reality of their behavior, as it challenges the false image they've built of themselves. The more you insist on accountability in a calm and non-confrontational way, the more uncomfortable it makes them. Over time, they'll begin to realize that their usual tactics of deflection and blame shifting will no longer work on you. This pushes them to either change their approach or retreat, both of which disrupt their need for control. Holding a narcissist accountable is not about winning an argument. It's about taking away their ability to manipulate the situation, forcing them to deal with the reality of their actions. Narcissists often rely on their charm to get what they want, using flattery and excessive praise to manipulate others into doing their bidding. They have a knack for making people feel special, but this charm is usually self-serving. One of the most powerful ways to punish a narcissist is by showing indifference to their charm. When they try to flatter you or shower you with attention, don't respond with the enthusiasm or gratitude they're expecting. Instead, remain neutral and unaffected. For example, if a narcissist tries to impress you with their accomplishments or flatter you with compliments, you can respond politely but without much emotion. "Thank you, that's nice," or simply nodding without engaging further. Narcissists thrive on the validation they receive from others, and when you deny them this, it undermines their sense of importance. By not reacting to their attempts to charm you, you're taking away the power they derive from manipulating people's perceptions. This will frustrate them because their usual methods of winning people over aren't working. Narcissists often struggle when they cannot control how others perceive them, and by showing indifference, you deny them that control. This doesn't mean you need to be rude or dismissive, but rather that you simply don't feed into their ego. By remaining unaffected by their charm, you take away the very tool they use to manipulate and control others, leaving them with fewer ways to get what they want. Narcissists rely on admiration, and by refusing to give them the admiration they crave, you start to destabilize their carefully constructed facade. The silent treatment is a powerful tool in punishing a narcissist, as it takes away the one thing they crave most, your attention. Narcissists thrive on validation and emotional reactions, so when you withdraw from them, it leaves them feeling powerless and frustrated. The key to using the silent treatment effectively is not to use it out of spite or anger, but as a strategy to reclaim control. When a narcissist engages in manipulation, belittling, or emotional abuse, simply refuse to engage with them. Don't respond to their provocations, avoid their attempts to start a conversation, and don't give them any emotional energy. This will make them uncomfortable, as they rely on your reactions to validate their existence. Narcissists will often try to break the silence by escalating their behavior or making grand gestures, but remain firm in your silence. The longer they are ignored, the more they will begin to realize that their tactics are no longer working. They will feel rejected and powerless, which goes against everything they stand for. The key here is consistency. Don't break the silence unless absolutely necessary, and never let them draw you back into their manipulative web. Over time, you'll see them struggle to regain the control they once had. The silent treatment doesn't need to be a long-term solution, but it can be an incredibly effective short-term strategy to make the narcissist feel the discomfort of being ignored, which in turn punishes them by stripping away their sense of superiority and influence. When you deny them your attention and reactions, you take away their power and leave them with nothing to manipulate. Setting clear expectations and holding a narcissist to them is an effective way to destabilize their sense of control. Narcissists thrive on ambiguity and the ability to twist situations to their advantage, often relying on others to fill in the gaps or accept their behavior without question. When you make your expectations clear, whether it's in a personal relationship, at work, or in any other context, you remove the room for them to manipulate or disregard the rules. For instance, if you expect respect and honesty, state it plainly. If they fail to meet those expectations, don't hesitate to call them out calmly but firmly. You don't need to raise your voice or get emotional. Simply say, "That doesn't align with what we agreed on," or "I expected a more respectful response." By doing this, you are asserting your boundaries in a way that forces them to confront their actions. Narcissists often avoid accountability, but when you make your expectations clear, you force them to take responsibility for their behavior. If they try to deflect or twist the situation, don't allow it. Stay consistent, and don't let them manipulate the conversation. When they realize they can't get away with pushing boundaries or ignoring agreements, it disrupts their need to control. This type of directness may not be something they're used to, and it can be an uncomfortable reminder for them that their usual tactics won't work on you. They'll either have to adapt to your expectations or face the consequences of being called out on their behavior. When you consistently hold them to a clear standard, you diminish their ability to play games or manipulate the situation, ultimately forcing them to acknowledge their shortcomings. Going no contact with a narcissist is one of the most powerful punishments you can administer. Narcissists thrive on attention and control, and when you completely cut them off, you strip them of the very thing that sustains them, your energy and emotional response. Going no contact means more than just ignoring them temporarily. It's about removing them from your life entirely, at least for a period of time. This approach forces them to confront the fact that they no longer have access to you, and it can be deeply unsettling for them. Narcissists often rely on others to maintain their inflated sense of self-worth, and when you remove yourself from the equation, they are left without their usual source of validation. The key to making no contact effective is consistency. Don't respond to their messages, avoid engaging in any form of communication, and stop participating in any interactions that allow them to continue manipulating you. This may be difficult at first, especially if the narcissist is someone you've been close to, but it's necessary for your emotional well-being. The narcissist will likely attempt to draw you back in with promises, apologies, or even emotional outbursts, but resist the urge to engage. No contact means no response, no exceptions. Over time, you will see how uncomfortable this makes them. They may attempt to manipulate others to get to you, but by maintaining no contact, you remove their ability to continue their cycle of emotional abuse. The more time passes with no contact, the more they realize their usual methods of control no longer work on you, which can be a powerful blow to their ego. While going no contact is often a difficult decision, it is one of the most effective ways to protect yourself and punish a narcissist by taking away their ability to continue exploiting your energy and emotions. Making a narcissist feel ignored is another powerful way to disrupt their sense of control. Narcissists thrive on being the center of attention, and when they are deprived of the admiration and focus they crave, it can make them feel insignificant and powerless. The key to this strategy is indifference. When a narcissist attempts to command your attention or dominate a conversation, resist the urge to engage or validate them. For instance, when they boast about their achievements or try to manipulate you with emotional outbursts, respond with calm neutrality or even silence. By not reacting to their attempts to draw attention to themselves, you send a clear message that their efforts to control the narrative will not succeed. This can be especially effective in social settings, where narcissists often expect to be the focal point. When they realize that you are no longer giving them the emotional reactions they need, their need for constant validation begins to erode. This indifference is not about being rude or dismissive, but rather about taking away the emotional energy they are trying to drain from you. Narcissists are skilled at seeking validation and attention, but when you show them that their efforts go unnoticed, they are forced to confront their own insecurities. They may escalate their behavior, trying to get a rise out of you, but staying consistently indifferent will frustrate them. The more you remain unaffected, the more they will struggle to regain the power they once had over you. Making a narcissist feel ignored is a quiet but powerful form of punishment, forcing them to acknowledge that they no longer have control over your emotions or attention. Using empathy to manipulate a narcissist's ego might seem counterintuitive, but it can be an incredibly effective tool in disarming their defenses and making them reveal their true nature. Narcissists are driven by their need for admiration, and they constantly seek validation to feel superior. When you subtly play into their ego, they lower their guard and often expose their weaknesses or insecurities, which can be used to your advantage. The key here is to use just enough empathy to make them feel understood or important, without fully feeding into their manipulations. For example, when a narcissist shares their achievements or struggles, listen attentively and respond in a way that acknowledges their feelings, but without reinforcing their inflated self-image. A response like, "I understand that you've worked hard for this," or "It must have been difficult for you," can momentarily satisfy their need for validation, but it doesn't give them the full praise they expect. This approach makes them feel seen, but without empowering their sense of entitlement. Once they feel understood, they may drop their guard, revealing more about their insecurities, their need for constant praise, or the manipulative tactics they use. By using their ego to make them more vulnerable, you can start to expose the cracks in their carefully crafted persona. Narcissists, despite their bravado, are often deeply insecure, and their obsession with power and control is rooted in fear. Using empathy strategically allows you to get them to open up, which gives you the upper hand in any interaction. This doesn't mean you have to be fake or insincere, but rather that you use their need for attention to your advantage, forcing them to confront their vulnerabilities without offering them the satisfaction of full validation. Narcissists are often deeply insecure, despite their outward confidence and bravado. This insecurity is what drives their constant need for validation and admiration. By subtly exposing their vulnerabilities, you can begin to undermine their carefully constructed facade without directly attacking them. The key to this is understanding that narcissists base their entire identity on a false sense of superiority, and when you make them confront their own flaws, it shakes the very foundation of their ego. This doesn't mean confronting them aggressively or pointing out their weaknesses in an overt manner. Instead, you can expose their insecurities through indirect comments or by asking questions that force them to reflect on their behavior. For instance, you might say something like, "I wonder how you would feel if someone treated you the way you've treated me," or "Does it ever bother you when others don't recognize your contributions?" These questions can make them uneasy without directly accusing them of anything. The discomfort they feel when confronted with the reality of their behavior is a form of punishment in itself. Narcissists are not accustomed to being held accountable for their actions, especially when their flaws are exposed without direct confrontation. The more you subtly shine a light on their insecurities, the more they are forced to grapple with the truth about themselves, which can destabilize their sense of control. They may not openly admit their flaws, but internally, the acknowledgement can eat away at them, slowly eroding their inflated sense of self. By exposing their insecurities in a way that doesn't directly challenge them, you make them feel vulnerable, and this is one of the most effective ways to undermine their power over you. Taking away a narcissist's supply of attention is perhaps the most direct and effective way to punish them. Narcissists thrive on being the center of attention. Whether it's through praise, admiration, or even conflict, they constantly seek validation to feed their fragile ego. When you stop providing them with this attention, you take away the very thing that sustains their sense of self-importance. The first step in this process is to recognize when the narcissist is trying to draw you in. whether through compliments, manipulation, or provocative behavior. By not engaging with them or feeding into their need for validation, you start to deprive them of their narcissistic supply. For instance, if they start boasting about their accomplishments or try to pull you into a dramatic situation, simply remain unresponsive or disengage entirely. You might politely acknowledge what they say, but without offering the admiration or emotional reaction they expect. By doing this, you show them that their attempts to control or manipulate you are futile. Narcissists will often escalate their behavior when they don't get the reaction they want. They may try to provoke you into an argument or make exaggerated claims to grab your attention, but if you continue to withhold your emotional engagement, they will eventually realize that their tactics are ineffective. Over time, this will frustrate them, as they can no longer feed off your reactions. The longer they are deprived of the attention they crave, the more desperate they may become. But this only further exposes their need for validation and weakens their ability to control you. When you take away their narcissistic supply, you take away their power to manipulate, and that is one of the most punishing things you can do to a narcissist. If you found these strategies helpful, take a moment to reflect on how you can apply them to protect your peace. Narcissists thrive on control, but when you take away their power, you reclaim yours. If you want to learn more about navigating difficult relationships and protecting yourself from manipulation, subscribe and stay tuned for more insights.